Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, when I went down to New Orleans to the ALEC convention last August, I remember going to a workshop and hearing a little bit about a bill they did in Florida and some other states, part of their efforts to dismantle public education. And there was a proposal to provide special needs scholarships. And lo and behold, all of a sudden I come back to Wisconsin, and what gets introduced? Get ready, I know you're going to have a shock look on your face. A bill to do just that, the exact model legislation. Now, I know what I often get from your side. You don't really want to believe that, something came from ALEC. What is that, a Baldwin brother? But I'll tell you, this one's a little more interesting. And the gentleman, my friend from the 63rd, I hopefully he'll come up and debate me on this, since he's the, what are you, the Grand Poobah of ALEC in Wisconsin? Is that the official title?
Please direct your comments to the chair.
King of the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Grand Poobah from Wisconsin, this is really interesting, because I think we saw our friend, the former Speaker, Scott Jensen, in the building today. And it's been a very special day to have his esteemed presence in the building. But what's interesting, Mr. Speaker, is I have a little email trail that goes from Brian Pleva at the American Federation for Children, Wisconsin, Pleva, thank you, to one of the authors of this bill, as well as, interestingly, a whole bunch of staff on your side of the aisle, but not to their state emails, their personal emails, which I thought was interesting. But it's telling them about this really good idea, this legislation that they have, and they attached it. And it starts out and talks about model legislation and definitions. And what's really funny is I remembered that bill from going down to the ALEC convention. So I went to the website, to ALEC, because, I'm a member. For full disclosure, I am the face of ALEC, sort of. And I joined to get the password so I could find out what their model legislation was. And I went to their website, and you know what? Gentlemen from the 64th, you're not going to believe this. They took away my access, not just mine.
Chair.
Mr. Speaker, you're right. Thank you. You know what they did, Mr. Speaker? They took away every legislative member of ALEC's access to model legislation. Now, that was why I joined. I wanted to get these great ideas that I heard about down in New Orleans. But, too many people, I guess, had access to them, so they took it away from the website. So a group that likes to operate in the shadows now is operating in the shadows of the shadows. So what was interesting, when this little email trail came on, and it came from a very important group that works a lot on our campaigns, and former Speaker Jensen is kind of their Grand Poobah. So we've got our Grand Poobah, we've got their Grand Poobah, we've got the ALEC model legislation, and I finally was able to find a copy on another website of the ALEC model bill, and you know what? It was almost identical, word for word, to the model legislation that came from the American Federation for Children. This is the shock time. Go ahead. So here we are with a special interest, writing legislation, delivering it through ALEC, but now it's all been cleansed off of their website, but we still have this email trail, Mr. Speaker, that points directly to the special interest writing this bill. So, it was really unfair. People on this side of the aisle, to ask the lady from the 56 these questions was unfair, because Scott Jensen was out in the hallway. And that's the person we should be talking to, the people who drafted this. Because this is part of dismantling public education in Wisconsin and Florida and Ohio and every single state it's introduced in. So the real people to ask are Scott Jensen, the real people to ask, although they're probably closed by now, the people over at ALEC. But it's not fair to ask someone in this body, because this bill doesn't come from this body. This bill is the identical bill that's been introduced, brought by special interest to ALEC, and introduced state by state by state. And it has very little to do with education, and has a whole lot to do with dismantling private education and helping taxpayer-funded vouchers. But it's all, here was what you would have, Mr. Speaker, if they still had their website so that I as a member could access. This is what it is, right here. This is the model legislation. You know, and what's really funny, if I can read from a printed document, Mr. Speaker, I go to what came around from the American Federation for Children. Let me just pick something at random.
Without
Section
objection.
6. Accountability standards for participating schools. What's here? Section 6. Responsibilities. Oh, I'm sorry, that's number 7. 6. Accountability standards for participating schools.
Word for word?
This is shock. Once again, identical legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the travesty that we have in front of us today. This is supposed to be Education Day when really it's ALEC Day or it's Scott Jensen Day. But it has very little to do with Education Day because this is a bill that they have recommended state by state, and I went to workshops where they offered this and other bills on how to dismantle public education. And you do it drip by drip, and this is one of those bills that'll do just that. It has nothing to do with helping kids with special needs, and it has everything to do helping groups that are special interests. So this amendment, Mr. Speaker, would simply take my ALEC Accountability Act and amend it to the bill. Because you know what? Let's go ahead and do the right thing. Let's give ALEC the credibility they deserve. After all, corporations have paid for this. Let's do the right thing and go ahead and let them register as a lobbyist so that we know when they fly someone on a scholarship down to New Orleans or Arizona or wherever the next conference is, we know who's paying for it. But this legislation has not been born in Wisconsin unless you say it's been born over at Scott Jensen's house in Waukesha. Where? Brookfield. That is a nicer area, isn't it? You're right. I forget. He is a Republican. But Mr. Speaker, this amendment really is trying to take care of what this legislation really is. It is not a piece of legislation to help kids with special needs. Instead, it's nothing more than one more special interest piece of legislation that we've seen this session. And I hope that you won't table this amendment, and let's finally do the right thing and expose these ALEC pieces of legislation like they should be.